Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. I'll just wait for a couple of seconds for some of the folks to join, inshallah. It's time for Maghrib. Maghrib actually just finished here in Jeddah, so I'll just wait for a couple of minutes for people to kind of join in, inshallah. And then we'll make a start, inshallah. So please share the feeds, guys, with others, inshallah. We are restarting on this topic after a gap of a week, inshallah. So, inshallah, I hope it will be beneficial for everyone. So let's make a start. Inna alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahi nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh. Wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. So, alhamdulillah, we are now in episode number 6 of this book. Last week we covered quite a few things with regards to how the various contexts of the Islamic movements and how actually the fiqh evolved over time. Although I did not go into a lot of details with regards to how the four madhahib actually evolved, because that is not a subject which is part of the discussion of the book. I touched basically a bit of from the times of Imam Malik, a little bit of the times of Imam Abu Hanifa, etc. And then we came on to the times of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. So today, inshallah, we'll continue on the actual hadith itself, and then we'll come to, you can say, the hadith of the 73 sects in reality. And on the second shot, we'll also be covering, inshallah, the actual kind of the earliest Islamic movements or the sects which were there. We'll try to cover maybe 2 or 3 today, inshallah. Although one thing I would just like to make very clear from the word go, that a lot of these movements, a lot of these sects are not in existence anymore. Yeah, so I don't feel that there is a necessity to go into a lot of detail, but I will be going into details amongst those particular philosophies which are still alive today, and as they say, alive and kicking today, and which we need to understand, and which has kind of repercussions on our faith, on our iman, and how we actually understand those particular movements. So today, inshallah, what I'll do is that I will start with the hadith of iman and Islam. And the reason I want to start with that is because that is something which, once we have to understand kind of the various sects which have been in existence since the last 1400 years, we need to also understand what exactly Islam is. What is the meaning of Islam? What is the meaning of Iman? So most of us, I think, we understand the hadith of Jibreel. That is the hadith which obviously forms the basic architecture of the faith itself. Yeah. Again, we are not going to be going into a lot of depth of that hadith, but as we know that when once Prophet ﷺ was sitting with the Sahaba, and a man came in a white, very clean dress, and he came in, and he sat with his knees next to the knees of the Prophet ﷺ. And then he started asking Prophet ﷺ certain questions. And the Sahaba, the companions, actually, they were very surprised that how come the person is asking the questions and then he is answering in the affirmative or the negation, when Prophet ﷺ was answering the questions. And as we know that person who was there asking those questions was Jibreel alayhi salam. And Prophet ﷺ explained to the Sahaba afterwards that he came to teach you your religion. Where Prophet ﷺ explained, in that particular hadith that, what is Iman, and as the question about Iman was basically that whosoever believes in in Allah, the messengers, And then it went on to explain the day of resurrection, the qadr, etc. The 6 things which we are aware of, yeah, the books, etc. Islam, Prophet ﷺ explained, is that, understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, performing a salah, giving zakah, and then fasting the month of Ramadan, and whosoever has the capacity, then he does Hajj as well. And then Ihsan, Prophet ﷺ explained, Ihsan is something as if you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way as if you are seeing him. But the least of it is as if he is seeing us. Yeah. And then the final question which was asked was that when is the hour going to be established? When is the day of resurrection? And Prophet ﷺ replied, the one who is asking doesn't know more than the one who is being asked. So this particular hadith, when we understand this hadith, then another important principle we get from this hadith is that now if we look at all the different movements, let's look at all the different sects which are in existence today, because the only way to really truly understand this book and to understand how actually Iblees has, how Shayateen have disintegrated the unity of the Ummah into various ways. We see that most of the sects, most of the groups, most of the parties, they agree, they affirm, yeah, and they actually are in agreement with this hadith. It is going to be very few individuals, very few groups, and very few sects who are not in agreement. Then obviously there is an explanation to this particular hadith, that how do we understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do we understand the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yeah. And this is where most of the ikhtilaf actually happens. And when we speak about the disintegration of the sects, then one thing we need to understand for sure is that what we also discussed in the last week is that Prophet ﷺ actually is mentioning all of these various groups and parties in the sects to be within the fold of Islam itself. Yeah, Prophet ﷺ is not saying that these particular sects are out of the fold of Islam. No, Prophet ﷺ actually is saying in the wording of the hadith is very clear. Prophet ﷺ is mentioning ummati, yeah, ummati ala salasi wa sabina firqa. That Prophet ﷺ is mentioning that my ummah is going to be split. Yeah, so that is this is also we discussed last time as well. This is an important principle to understand from this angle as well. Now, once we understand this, that these particular individuals are part of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then we spoke about kind of the various movements which came and which have been in existence for a very long time. Then we spoke about certain aspects of those movements as to what are some of the pros and the cons of some of those movements. Yeah, and we did discuss some of them in a kind of a very summarized fashion. Now, another important principle which we need to also understand is that the movements actually they change over time. Like fiqh evolves, movements have also evolved. Something which actually can never evolve is the fundamental, is the Aqidah itself. Yeah, that is something which cannot evolve. That is something which has been given, which is cast in stone. And if there is any individual, any group, any party which now wants to come up with its own philosophy with regards to how do we understand the fundamentals of Iman, how do we understand the fundamentals of Islam, and even you would say that if someone tries to come up with new terminologies as to how do we understand these agreed upon principles. So, for example, if someone wants to change the understanding of the word sunnah, yeah, if someone wants to change the understanding of the word hadith, yeah, if someone wants to change the understanding of the word fiqh, So these are agreed upon terminologies which have been agreed over time by the consensus of the Muslims. Then that would also mean that that particular individual who is trying to change these agreed upon terminologies, then he's on the fringe. He's amongst the fringe. He's amongst the people who are on the sidelines. And as we said, that this particular hadith of Islam and Iman and Ihsan, this is why this is so important, is because, as we've mentioned, that the bulk of the Ummah agrees to this, the principles which are actually defined in this particular hadith. Yes, we have then, what we have is that we have, let's say, different understandings of Aqidah, and this is where we discussed a bit of detail last time as well, that we have something called an Athari Aqidah, yeah? Then we have something which is called Ashari Aqidah, and then we have Maturidi Aqidah, yeah? And then obviously the fringe movements have their own aqaid. Now, the important point is that yes, we make distinctions amongst the aqaid, that is important, but still all these people are going to be within the fold of Islam. We are not going to be saying, Nauzubillah, that they are, because of these differences in aqaid, we are just going to be calling them something else. No, that is not going to be the case. At the end of the day, based on the evidence, we decide. And the correct understanding is always going to be the understanding, which was the understanding of whom? Of the earliest generations. Okay, I am not going into technical jargon with, in these particular durus, because I do understand that these will be these particular durus are for the public, and the public needs to understand it at their level. Yeah, I'm not going to be using very difficult terminologies, because otherwise I'll have to explain each and every terminology. So I'm going to be using very simple words, simple way of understanding things, etc. Now, when we say generic Sunnism, then what are the generic aqaid of the Sunnis? That we respect the Sahaba, we respect the creed of the five predecessors. Yeah, we consider Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman, Ali radhiyallahu anhu, and all the Sahaba to be amongst the ones who are the pious ones. We respect the household of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. What else is there? Then we understand that how do we understand the ikhtilafat? How do we understand the disagreements which took place in the earlier generations of the Muslims? The correct Aqidah of Ahl Sunnah with regards to, for example, the earliest differences. What were the earliest differences? So the earliest differences were, for example, after the death of Usman radhiyallahu anhu, some very earliest differences came around. When Usman radhiyallahu anhu was killed by these people who came in from different parts of the Muslim world and formed a group. And again, I touched base upon exactly what were some of the reasons. Again, I'm not going to be going into a lot of detail. Is that this was the first disagreement where a part of the companions wanted the murder of Usman to be avenged. And Ali radhiyallahu anhu was of the view, what? That basically, that he wanted first for everyone to be under his leadership, under his bay'ah, and once that is given, then after that, obviously, slowly and gradually, he would work towards getting the murderers of Usman radhiyallahu anhu. Now, some of the Sahaba did not agree with that particular, notion of Ali radhiyallahu anhu. Now, this was the first disagreement. And how do we understand this disagreement, which continued for a number of years until you can say the Khilafah of Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu, and then Yazid rahimahullah, and then if we continue from onwards? How do we understand this? Now we have understood this, that most of the sects of Ahl Sunnah, they keep quiet, they do not discuss these differences, and this is what we will be doing as well, that we do not discuss points of disagreement, which are from amongst, you can say, some, yani which you can say are some of the problems which actually have occurred in the beginning of the yani Islamic history. And why don't we actually discuss these particular issues? And there are actually reasons why don't we go into details. And some of the basic reasons, for some of the core reasons are that both sides have, certain areas where they were correct. Both sides had certain other areas in which they were incorrect. So from amongst the principles of Aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah is that we overlook the faults of individuals, and we speak about the hasanat. We speak about the unity of the Muslims, but we do not speak about the disagreements. Yes, those disagreements are part of history. Those disagreements we learn from. Those particular disagreements are the disagreements which you can say, again, a lot of lectures, books have been written. And those earliest disagreements, you can say, formed the basis of some of the earliest sects as well. Okay, some of the earliest sects as well. Now, once we say that Islam is a package, once we say that the creed is one element of that package, that what it necessitates is that the Muslims at large, they need to come together. But how can we have unity? The question is, how can we have unity when people have different interpretations of Islam? And then obviously the hadith of the splitting of the ummah, which is called the hadith of iftaraq, when we discussed that hadith even the last time. So we understand that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has predicted disunity. But this is not to suggest that we are being commanding Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to be disunified. No, that is not the case. The command is to be unified. That is the command. Yeah? Now, also we understand that there have been various predictions, and all those various predictions most of those predictions relate to the end of times. So the hadith of the 73 sects, this is not a license to break up the ummah. Number one. Number two, as we also discussed the last time, this is not to suggest that we focus on the fringe elements of those particular sects. As we said that the 72, 73, and this particular verse Saba'in, this actually is used in the construction to say many, a number of, let's say, a large number. And again, like I said the last time, a number of books have been written which explain, that whether it's 72, then some other books have been written too, again, after a few years, that these are now 72. But again, they keep on changing, yeah? So the bottom line is that they are more or less amongst this number. Now, we also did mention the last time that when we have a large whole of the Muslims, which is the major chunk of the Muslims, which is not disintegrating, then there are certain splinter groups which are on bid'ah, which are upon misguidance, which are upon dalala, which are upon, areas which they shouldn't be upon. Yeah? And some of them we have actually discussed and we have spoken about. Now, does this mean that the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to be less than the other ummahs if we discuss it from, let's say, technical perspective? Yeah. So what do I mean by that? So when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that my ummah is going to be divided into 73, so what does this mean? That is it going to be more or less? than the previous ummahs? And the answer is that the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to be the largest on the day of judgment. It's going to be the biggest on the day of judgment. How do we know that? We know that from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he mentioned that 1/3, that when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is now explaining the day of judgment, the day of resurrection, and he is mentioning that on the day of judgment, I would see a large nation, and I would think maybe, that this is my nation. And then I will be told that this is the nation of Musa alayhi salam. And then there will be a large nation which will be brought in. Yeah. And then Prophet ﷺ said that I think that you, that O Sahaba and the Muslims, you will be 1/3 of the people of Jannah. And then Prophet ﷺ said that maybe you will be 1/2 of the people of Jannah. And then Prophet ﷺ said that I hope that you will be 2/3 of the people of Jannah. So that particularly means that the bulk of the people of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are the people who are on righteousness, are the people who are on taqwa. As we know that around 124,000 messengers came in. And out of those 124,000 messengers, all the ummahs are going to be there. And as Rasulullah said, that some of the prophets will just be alone. There will be no one to follow them. Yeah. So when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioning about these particular individuals and people and the group, then we say that every person of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has a relationship with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. There's a relationship which is there with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So one thing is certain, that yes, there will be people who would have bid'ah, there would be people which will be on misguidance. But number one, we cannot call them kuffar. That is the first thing, as we explained the last time. Yeah, as we explained that there are also various darajat of bid'ahs as well. Yeah, and I gave so many examples, so I'm not going to go into the same examples again. Number two, yes, they would have done something which has caused them to break away. So which requires again knowledge, which requires tahqiq, that what is that the various sects which they have done which caused them to break away from the body of the Muslims. If the level of the difference which is reached is in the fundamentals of Aqidah and theology, then we can say that a breaking away has occurred. But for sure, you cannot say that if there are ikhtilafat amongst the principles of fiqh, there are differences amongst how do we understand, then we are definitely not saying this is part of that equation. Okay? Also, we understand that when we speak about these particular people, then we are going to be saying that definitely they are not the people which are kuffar. Okay, this is something which we need to be very, very careful about. Now, another thing is, as we said, that most of these splinter groups were they were few in number if you look into the grand scheme of things. Yeah. So, for example, Khawarij, the initial estimates of Khawarij, there were something around about 6,000 individuals, which then changed over time. You talk about other kind of fringe groups like Jahmiyyah. It is said that maybe they numbered 50 odd or 100 odd in number, something along those lines. So these splinter groups were always less. They were not large groups of individuals. Mu'tazila again. Mu'tazila they were kind of slightly more than the others, because they had the backing of Khalifa Harun al-Rashid and his son Mamun and Mutawakkil, his son, etc. So they were kind of slightly more, and we know the kind of the history of what happened with Imam Ahmad. And again, I'll speak about that in a bit. Now, once we have understand this bit, then what is important for us to understand? That by looking at some of the differences of why these splinter groups evolved, how these splinter groups evolved, we can say that we would understand a little bit about what exactly is that in our day and age we need to be careful about, or we need to be cautious about. So, for example, the Kharijites. Yeah. Now, Prophet ﷺ predicted that the Kharijites are going to be from amongst the dogs of the hellfire. And who were these people? Who exactly were these people? So, Zul Khuwaisara, there was an individual by the name of Zul Khuwaisara. Once Ali radiallahu anhu, he sent some war booty from Yemen to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam distributed that booty amongst 4 individuals. So it was kind of a bit of gold, which had some some overlay upon it, which he distributed amongst 4 individuals. And this individual, Zul Khuwaisara, he said, Nauzubillah, that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are not just. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied to him, if I am not fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then who is going to be more fearful than me? So Nauzubillah, he insinuated that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not just in his dealings. This was an insinuation. And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually predicted that they will arise the people amongst you who will regard your prayers and fasting and good deeds with contempt and scorn. And they will recite the Quran, but it will not go past their throats. And they will pass through the religion the way an arrow passes through its prey. Yeah, this is what the Prophet ﷺ predicted about these individuals. Now, basically what happened, that when Siffin took place, when this war between Ali and Muawiyah, anhu, it came to an end. And how it came to an end was that the army of Muawiyah, anhu, they stood upon their weaponry, the Quran, that let the Quran decide between us, that let's reach a common agreement, let's arbitrate, and let's discuss how can we resolve this issue of to catch the murderers of Usman, which was the basic cause of disagreement. When that happened, so from the side of Muawiyah, Abdul Rahman bin Auf was positioned for this particular task. Sorry, Amr bin As, not Abdul Rahman. Amr bin As was positioned by Muawiyah. And Abu Musa al-Ashari was from the side of Ali radhiyallahu anhu. They came together and they said, okay, fine, whatever decision we would give, that has to be acceptable to all parties. Now, something along the lines came to pass. Again, I won't go into the details of that, but their decision was not really acceptable to some individuals, and it didn't come to pass. The decision which they took didn't come to pass. Now, after that, Ali radhiyallahu anhu, he went back to Kufa with his army, and obviously Muawiyah, he was in Syria, in Damascus, and he also had Egypt, and later on he also had part of the other places of the Muslim Empire under his command. So when Ali radhiyallahu anhu, he entered Kufa, there was a group under a leadership of a particular individual. They settled outside the city. They didn't enter the city. And it is said there were something like between 6 to 12,000. Again, initially it seems there were 12,000 people, and later those 12,000 became 6,000. So they said that we do not agree with this decision which Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu took with regards to ending the war with Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And they had three particular areas of concern. And those were, the three areas were basically, they said, number one, that we do not agree that human beings can arbitrate. Yani they can come together to discuss and reach a consensus and give a decision with regards to the difference, if there is a difference of opinion amongst the Muslims. They said that Allah's book has to be sufficient in order for it to decide amongst individuals. The second issue was that why didn't, in Jamal, when Ali radiallahu anhu, he won the battle, in the Battle of Jamal, why didn't he take the war booty, and why didn't he take the Muslims as captives of war? And their third issue was that why did Ali radiallahu anhu agree to drop the name of Amirul Mu'mineen against, in front of his name? So, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he basically suggested to Ali that what I will do is I will go out, I will discuss with these people, and they were in a place called Harura. That was a place called Harura, in which they were kind of all their individuals were. And he went, Ibn Abbas went to see them, and he argued with them, and gave them the first logic that, look, when you say that human beings cannot be the arbitrators, they cannot be the decision makers in conflicts, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that when you go out for Hajj and someone hunts, so you can have two individuals come together and then arbitrate, give a decision what should happen to the individual who has hunted during the days of Hajj. And also he gave the example that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, that whenever there is a disagreement amongst the people who are married, that one person from the man's family, husband's family, and one person from the wife's family can come together and they can decide. So when Ibn Abbas gave this argument, they actually, some of the people, they agreed, some from the Kharijites, they agreed. The second answer which Ibn Abbas gave to them was from Jamal, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran about the Azwaj Mutahharat as the mothers of the believers. So Ibn Abbas said that if you do not agree for Aisha radiallahu anha to be our mother, then you are out of the fold of Islam. And if you take her as a captive, then you are again out of the fold of Islam. So what do you want? So if you claim that Ali did a wrong thing, then you cannot claim that. So some other additional individuals from the Kharijites, they understood. And the third example which Ibn Abbas gave them was from the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, when Prophet ﷺ asked Ali radiallahu anhu to drop his name in front of the treaty, to say Muhammad Rasulullah ﷺ, to cut it off and say Muhammad bin Abdullah, at the time of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And they understood. So what happened was that 1/3 of the people of the Kharijites, they returned back with Ibn Abbas. So it is said roughly 4,000 of them remained. Still, Ali radiallahu anhu did not fight them. And Ali radiallahu anhu told them that as long as the blood of the Muslims is safe from you, You can live peacefully outside, wherever, whatever you want to do, you keep on doing until unless we are safe from your fitna. And obviously, as we know, that they killed the son of Khabab ibn Arad, and Nauzubillah, they killed also the wife and the unborn son of Abdullah bin Khabab bin Ard. And after that, obviously, Ali radiallahu anhu, he fought these Khawarij. Now, these were from amongst the very, you can say, the earliest, the very first sect which broke off, and which actually you can say, you can actually trace it back to Zul Khuwaisara, because these people were from the loins of Zul Khuwaisara itself, as per the prediction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, the author Ibn Jawzi, he mentions particularly 6 sects, and then these 6 sects he divides into 12 each, and then he gives explanation of each. So like I said, I'm not going to be going into a lot of detail. I want us to understand that how does it impact us in today's days and age. That is what is really important for us to understand. So what were the other aqaid of Khawarij, for example? So other aqaid of Khawarij was that any person who commits a major sin, he is out of the fold of Islam, which is obviously not the aqeedah of Ahlul Sunnah. Again, from the aqaids of those earlier generation of, you can say, the sects was, another of those were Mu'tazila. And what were the, you can say, the key issues with Mu'tazila? That the Mu'tazila, they did not affirm the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all. And we understand that as far as the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned, then we can not do 4 things. We cannot do ta'til of those attributes, which is negation of those attributes, number 1. Number 2 is that we cannot do ta'rif of those attributes, the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yani we cannot distort their meanings. Number 1 is you cannot negate. So for example, you cannot say that the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something which came afterwards, which was created afterwards. You cannot say that Kalamullah, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the Quran, is something which is created. Okay? You cannot say that ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like I said, mentioned knowledge, is something which is created. You cannot deny that. Number 2, you cannot distort the meanings of the names and attributes of Allah. You cannot do that either. Number 3, we cannot have any tashbih or tamsil, which is the resemblance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name or attributes to any of its creation. Yeah. So for example, Laisa kamislihi shay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to be understood without any example. We cannot give, for example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about Yad in the Quran, the hand of Allah, then we cannot have a mental picture of or mental image of how that hand is going to be. And that is something which is not allowed. As we've mentioned, I think in one of the earlier lessons, is that anything which is from the ghaib, which is from the al-ghaib, can only be known from evidence from the Quran and Sunnah. Otherwise, we cannot affirm any of those particular attributes or information. Number 4, we cannot do any ta'if in the names of attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which basically means what? Which basically means that we cannot seek to know the nature of those attributes apart from what Allah and His Messenger has explained to us. Okay? So Kharijites, Mu'tazila, then you have Jahmiya, then you have another major group by the name of Shia. I think what I'll do is for today, because this will require a bit of discussion, so inshallah what I'll do is I'll stop here for today, and then we'll continue from here onwards inshallah. And then once we look at the bigger picture inshallah of the Shia and the attributes of how do we understand the various kind of the offshoots of Shia, because all the offshoots of Shia also are not the same. Okay, that is also something which we need to understand. All of them are not the same. So inshallah we'll finish here today. If there's any question or anything, please let us know inshallah in the comment section, and we'll inshallah answer those questions also in the weeks to come. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.